Hi everyone, welcome to Module 2 or Module 2A. I've divided Module 2 into two sections, A and B. This is Module 2 of LB 326B. In the last video, I explained the Galenic system of humoral medicine, the system that had reigned for more than 2,000 years and dominated all medical instruction in the West. Although there had been some challenges to the system, as explained in the last lecture, this system remained intact and relatively unquestioned. So, at what point did all of this change? Perhaps the most important development was the French Revolution of 1789. The French Revolution not only brought down the monarchy of France and introduced an element of democracy for the people, it also brought down all of the old institutions and the old ways of thinking. The Catholic Church and the stuffy, bookish system of learning, represented by the University of Paris, were also attacked and largely dismantled and reformed. And you can see in the large picture on the slide here, the man in the cardinal outfit sort of being led to this wheel where they're going to squeeze the fat out of him. So obviously, the Catholic Church is under attack during the Paris or during the French Revolution, and is being defunded and attacked for its old ways of thinking. Before the 1789 revolution, medical instruction at the University of Paris was in Latin and was based upon the same Galenic texts that had been used for thousands of years. And in the bottom corner, you see there medieval teaching is very much the sort of sage on the stage. It's the man standing in the front, all of the students, male, seated and listening to him read Galen to them. But within 5 years of the French Revolution of 1789, this whole system of learning medicine, the ways in which the professor and the students thought about medicine, all of this dramatically changed. By 1795, instruction at the University of Paris had switched over to French, and the Galenic texts had been eliminated. The bottom line is that all of the old ways of doing things were being thrown out of the window. The king was gone, the church was undermined and powerless, and the people were creating a new France with all new democratic institutions. So, what was the Paris School of Medicine? The Paris School of Medicine was not really based upon any new developments in the natural sciences per se, nor upon any huge technological breakthrough. It was more than anything an epistemological revolution. Now, when we say epistemological revolution, what does that mean? Well, epistemology is the study of how we know what we know and how we learn things and who's going to represent the voice of authority. So, where does that knowledge come from? How does that knowledge come to us? Now, you see here in the medieval era, knowledge came from the master. So you see the master in the picture of the 16th century, reading Galen to the students. Galen was the authority. Galen's knowledge is not questioned. If you find something that falls outside of what Galen says, you just try to shoehorn it into Galen and make it fit. Medicine was considered a philosophy. It was taught by philosopher physicians or Galenic masters, and it comes out of a book. Um, by the time we get to the Paris school, we have a completely different way of epistemology, of a different way of knowing what we know or of learning what we know. Observation becomes the authority. Galen's books are thrown out the window. Medicine is not a philosophy, it's a science, and it's taught by scientists. Medicine is learned from doing, from clinical observation, from the dissection of cadavers, and direct contact with the patients from empirical knowledge. So these are two totally different ways of approaching medicine in an epistemological sense. So, if this new system that we call the Paris School of Medicine relied upon what we would call experiential, hands on learning or doing clinical rounds, it required one thing above all else, and that is human bodies. If there are no bodies to look at and poke at, the hands on learning aspect of this system would be pretty limited. So Paris solved this problem by instituting a full-scale reform of its systems of hospitals. And you see in these slides, you see in one slide a dissection being performed in a Paris medical theater. So this is not like medieval Galenic medical school where an expert just reads to you some text in Latin from a podium and you just sit there and mutely, blindly listen to what the master is telling you. Here the students are doing. You also see a new style Paris hospital ward where the students are observing the patients, interviewing the patients, touching the patients. So students are doing, they're not just book learning. Now, much of the change that comes about from the Paris School of Medicine had a lot to do with the changes that were being instituted in hospitals. So before the revolution, hospitals in most of Europe, including France, were run by religious institutions, namely the Catholic Church. And frankly speaking, hospitals served as nothing more than a place to warehouse the sick and dying. No one really went to the hospital to be cured. They only went there to die and to be able to die in a place where they could receive last rites and gain entry to heaven. People who went to the hospital were those who were totally desperate, totally alone, totally without resources or family or friends. Hospitals before the 1800s were a dumping ground. So hospitals were a charity institution run by those who were easing you into death, nothing more. On a practical level, the conditions were also appalling. Patients were heaped into beds, often with unremoved corpses. Soiled linens went unchanged. There was no real concept of bathing or washing the patients. And in the pictures here on the slide, you can see patients just sort of willy-nilly piled into bed, several people to a bed. You can see in the one in the lower corner, this is actually a plague hospital in Venice, Italy, and you can see the doctors just sort of throwing the patients off of the second level of the building as people just carry the corpses away. So this is not a place that anybody in there, if they have any alternative, wants to go to. However, after the French Revolution in 1789, the administration and structure of the French hospital is dramatically reformed. Religious orders were stripped of their rights, and hospitals were placed under governmental administration. New hospitals, funded by the state of France, were also opened. Existing hospitals and clinics were renovated, and their administration was centralized under the control of the French government. The new hospital system in France had many new and unique features. These hospitals had the first central admissions desks. Another very important thing was patients were now grouped in wards based upon medical assessment and according to their symptoms. So you can see in the blueprint of the hospital, you can see that this looks very similar to a modern day hospital. You have wards sort of extending off in wings. And so what this does is you have like maybe a ward of people who have syphilis. You have a ward of people who have cholera. You have a ward of people who have consumption or tuberculosis. You have the patients separated out according to symptomology or according to disease. There are also nurses' stations, ward halls. There's a morgue attached to the hospital. There are public toilets, bathrooms, laundry facilities, and increasingly even operating rooms. So this is completely different the from the dumping ground that the hospital was considered to be prior to this time. Now the hospital has become a place of research and learning. And the patients know this. Patients are now seeking hospitals. They want to go to the hospital to get learned medical attention, not to face a certain death surrounded by nuns and monks. In fact, in the new democratic wave that was sweeping France after the revolution, many people felt it was their patriotic duty to go to the hospital when they were sick, because by doing so, they were furthering medical learning.